The Galactic Empire attacked Earth. Hours later, their empire was gone. The monitor did not show a fleet, it showed an arithmetic error. Across the tactical grid of the flagship, the electronic markers vanished in short, clean groups. Overwarlord Kael'thas leaned over the stone table, his four mandibles clicking against his chiseled jaw. The main screen did not flicker or fade. It simply became slate gray, reflecting the dull iron walls of the command deck. No backup networks activated. No alarms went off. The entire forward armada was gone, leaving only the cold silence of an empty system. Would you have negotiated, or would you have closed the lane? Because Marshal Diaz did not open the channel. Stay close to see why. The border treaty had sat in the central archives on Citadel Aegis Prime for 300 cycles. It was a simple block of gray data, signed by a human diplomat who had carried no weapons and left no guards. The Empire had grown across 40 systems by tracing lines through the stars and breaking whatever lived on the other side. Kael'thas had led 18 of those campaigns himself. To the hegemony, the quiet patch of space around the yellow star was not a nation. It was an unfinished entry in a ledger, an administrative detail that required a formal signature. On Sol Station Horizon 9, Fleet Marshal Junis Diaz adjusted her grease-stained wool watch cap against the chill of the unheated deck. The air smelled of burnt oil and the faint, bitter edge of recycled coolant. She sat in a canvas chair that had lost its left armrest 3 years ago, her pale eyes fixed on the long-range sensor boards. A small ceramic transit flask sat on the metal ledge beside her, its rubber seal leaking a thin line of white steam. She did not look at the countdown clock. She tightened the threads of the leaking flask until the steam stopped. The Vanguard just crossed the perimeter, Captain Robert Ty said, his hand resting on the frame of his display screen. He did not look up from the flashing white indicators. They are not broadcasting a civilian greeting, Marshal. They are moving in a standard box pattern. They are waiting for a distress call, Diaz replied, her voice dropping into a flat, cadenced hum. They think we fight by their rules. They want us to pull the outer ships back to protect the docks so they can trap the whole line in one drop. Analyst Clara Ross stepped away from the logistical bank, holding a strip of printed thermal paper. The tactical file from their core network is standard. They have mapped our trade routes, our fueling docks, and our cargo bays. Their files show we have 0 active combat vessels within 3 light-years. Diaz took a slow sip from her transit flask. The liquid was lukewarm, tasting faintly of metal and dried leaves. They checked the docks, she said softly. They didn't check the rocks. Across the system, the vanguard of the Cronian fleet advanced through the dark sectors. Kael'thas watched the target planet grow on his primary display. The world had no defensive rings, no military fortresses, and no battleships in high orbit. His flagship sent an automated decree across all open frequencies, demanding total control of the system within 5 minutes. The message was cold, written in the flat terms of an estate transfer. The Empire did not ask for a surrender. It simply filed an eviction notice. When the humans did not answer, the warlord gave the order to fire. 3 heavy capital vessels unleashed their kinetic payloads toward the outer defense platforms of Horizon 9. The steel structures tore apart in silence, their modular sections turning into clouds of floating debris. Kael'thas waited for the human navy to scramble. He waited for the panic that always followed the first strike, but the human channel stayed completely dead. The platforms are down, Ty reported, his fingers tracing the red lines that now replaced the outer stations. No casualties. The automated crews evacuated 20 minutes before the drop. Good, Diaz said. She set her ceramic flask down on the console with a small, sharp click. They have committed their main engines to the vector. They cannot turn back without clearing their drive blocks. Activate the grid. She reached out and flipped 3 heavy toggle switches on the ancient panel. The metal was cold against her thumb. Deep within the ice sheets of the outer moons, 300 cycles of silence came to an end. Massive automated silos, hidden beneath miles of frozen rock, began to slide open. They did not launch ships. They did not charge energy beams. They simply turned their targeting arrays toward the coordinates where the Imperial Vanguard had entered. On the Imperial flagship, the bridge consoles suddenly flashed a deep, steady purple. Kael'thas lunged toward the navigation station, his obsidian dermal plates scraping against his armor. Pull the Vanguard back to the jump points, he shouted, his upper mandibles flaring. Reset the drive blocks now. The navigation officer did not answer. The screen before him showed that the fleet's warp drives had stalled. The space around them had turned into a thick mire of subspatial interference. The small black boxes hidden inside every human commercial relay for 3 centuries were no longer broadcasting trade data. They were functioning as gravity anchors, locking the Imperial fleet into a fixed grid. "We cannot cycle the engines," the officer said, his hands moving frantically over the controls. "The gravity wells are collapsing around the main ships. We are pinned." Kael'thasrex felt a cold weight settle beneath his scales. The humans had not built a defensive line to protect their planet. They had used their own outpost as bait to draw his entire armada into a firing pocket. The realization broke through his certainty like a stone through glass. He had spent his life fighting armies that hid behind shields, but he had never modeled an enemy that treated an entire war as an automated equation. "They are not trying to talk to us," Kael'thasrex whispered, his jaw tightening as he looked at the dead indicators. "They never were." On Horizon 9, Ross locked the final tracking sequence into the network. "The anchors are holding," she said. "The entire Imperial vanguard is packed into the target zone. Drive blocks are completely red." "Release the Vanguard Matrix," Diaz ordered. Her voice remained level, devoid of anger or pride. Deep within the mass shadows of the outer planets, 14,000 automated silos fired at the same instant. The weapons did not use plasma or explosive charges. They were solid rods of dense tungsten, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. They did not need to aim for specific hulls. The Matrix had been calibrated to cover every square meter of the entry lane with mathematical precision. The strike hit the Armada like a physical wall. The tungsten projectiles cut through the Imperial shielding systems before the generators could cycle their frequencies. Capital ships were pierced from bow to stern, their thick iron plates peeling away like wet paper. The hulls did not explode. They were simply torn into fragments by the sheer kinetic force of the impacts. Within 40 minutes, the primary fleet of 1,400 warships was reduced to drifting slag. But the Matrix did not stop at the border. The target beacons embedded in the commercial relays had spent 300 cycles mapping more than just the local lane. They had tracked every supply run, every fuel transfer, and every command signal back to the heart of the Empire. The automated mass drivers adjusted their mounts, firing the next wave of warp-integrated slugs directly along the hegemony's own logistics chain. In the core war chamber of Citadel Aegis Prime, Chronicler Bairn watched the secondary monitors begin to fail. The indicators did not flash warnings. They went dark in a perfect sequential line, tracing a path from the outer sectors directly toward the Iron Capital. One world after another fell silent as the automated kinetic slugs struck the primary naval yards, the assembly stations, and the command citadels. The automated counteroffensive did not drop a single bomb on a city. It did not target population centers. It simply extracted every piece of military infrastructure from the surface of 40 worlds with the clinical precision of a surgeon. The grand shipyards that had built the Empire's pride for 9,000 years were reduced to fields of gray powder in less than 6 hours. Bairn pulled his secondary antennae tight against his head casing as the floor beneath him began to shudder. The emergency bulkheads of the Citadel were sealing, but there was no air left in the lower corridors to protect. The central power grid that connected the entire hegemony had been severed at the root. The great iron hall, carved by thousands of workers centuries ago, was cold and dark. He managed to reach the main archivist terminal before the backup cells failed. A final subspatial transmission from the human flagship was looping on the primary receiver. It was not a demand for territory. It was not a declaration of victory. It was just the level voice of the human marshal, recorded before the first silo had opened. Bairn sat in the gathering dark as the terminal screen went black. The names of the 40 systems were fading from the core memory banks, deleted by an automated system that did not care about imperial history or sovereign rights. The hegemony had treated the quiet border as a weakness, never understanding that the silence was just the space between the question and the answer. Across the room, a small piece of debris floated through the widening crack in the unpressurized bulkhead. It was the cracked base of a ceramic transit flask, its gray surface covered in a thin layer of white frost. The heat was gone from the metal, leaving only a cold white smudge against the dark iron floor.